August 23, 2024. A small Ukrainian drone, worth less than a used car, crosses into Russian airspace. Its target, a weapon system that costs more than the GDP of some nations. Within minutes, a $900 million S-400 air defense battery, one of the most advanced in the world, erupts into a fireball visible from space. This wasn't luck. This was asymmetric warfare at its most devastating. And for Moscow, it was the beginning of a strategic nightmare that would expose the fragility of Russia's most prized military asset. This is the story of how Ukraine turned the tables on Russia's air defenses, and why this single strike may have changed the course of the war. To understand why this strike matters, you need to understand what the S-400 Triumf really is. First deployed in 2007, the S-400 is Russia's flagship air defense system, a technological fortress designed to protect strategic sites from aircraft, cruise missiles, and ballistic threats. It can track up to 300 targets simultaneously and engage 36 of them at once. Its radar can detect objects up to 600 kilometers away. Its missiles can intercept targets flying at altitudes of 30 kilometers, nearly twice the cruising altitude of a commercial airliner. Each S-400 battalion is a self-contained fortress. Command posts, radar trucks, missile launchers, and support vehicles. A single battery costs upwards of $500 million. A full deployment, nearly $1 billion. Russia has sold the S-400 to China, India, and Turkey, marketing it as invincible. Moscow's own defenses rely on it. The Kremlin positioned S-400 batteries around Moscow, St. Petersburg, and critical military installations, including occupied Crimea. But there was a problem that would only reveal itself when the war began. The S-400 was designed to stop supersonic jets, ballistic missiles, and high-altitude bombers. It was never designed to stop something small, slow, and flying at treetop level. It was never designed to stop a $500 drone. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, the world expected a quick Russian victory. Moscow had tanks, jets, and cruise missiles. Ukraine had courage and creativity. Within months, Ukraine's military and volunteer engineers began weaponizing consumer drones, DJI Mavics, Chinese-made quadcopters, fixed-wing hobbyist models. They attached grenades, mortar rounds, and shaped charges. They wrote custom software to bypass jamming. They trained thousands of operators. But the real breakthrough came in 2023. Ukrainian engineers developed long-range reconnaissance and strike drones capable of flying hundreds of kilometers into Russian territory. These weren't the Turkish Bayraktars that dominated early headlines. These were homegrown, low-cost, hard-to-detect platforms. Some were built in garages, others in abandoned factories. They cost a fraction of a traditional missile, but they could reach the same targets. And they could do something even more dangerous. They could swarm. By mid-2024, Ukraine was launching coordinated drone strikes deep into Russia, targeting air bases, oil refineries, ammunition depots, and air defense systems. Moscow's S-400 batteries, once symbols of invincibility, were now being hunted. August 23rd, Kursk Oblast, just 60 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. A Russian S-400 battery sits camouflaged near a military airfield. Its radar scans the sky. Its crew monitors screens. They're confident. After all, this system was designed to stop the most advanced threats in the world. But confidence is a vulnerability. The planning for this strike began weeks earlier. Ukrainian military intelligence, working with signals intelligence units, had been tracking Russian air defense deployments along the border. They used satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and reports from partisans operating inside Russia. Every piece of data was fed into a targeting database. The S-400 battery near Kursk was flagged as a priority target, not just because of its strategic value, but because of its location. It was positioned to defend a key Russian airbase used for launching strikes against Ukrainian cities. Taking it out would create a gap in Russia's defensive umbrella, a window of vulnerability that could be exploited for future operations. The Ukrainian team selected a multi-drone approach. They would use a combination of reconnaissance drones to confirm the target location, decoy drones to overwhelm Russian air defense tracking systems, and strike drones carrying precision-guided munitions. The entire operation would be coordinated coordinated from a command post hundreds of kilometers away, with operators watching live video feeds transmitted via encrypted satellite links. The drones themselves were a mix of technologies. Some were modified commercial platforms, cheap, expendable, and difficult to distinguish from civilian aircraft on radar. Others were custom-built, fixed-wing designs capable of carrying heavier payloads over longer distances. Each drone was programmed with multiple navigation waypoints and equipped with backup guidance systems in case GPS was jammed. At 3:45 a.m., the operation began. The first wave consisted of 6 decoy drones launched from different locations. These drones flew deliberately erratic patterns, appearing and disappearing on Russian radar screens. Their purpose was simple: create noise, overwhelm the enemy's decision-making process, force them to waste time identifying real threats from false ones. Russian air defense operators saw the contacts. They conferred with their command center. The signatures didn't match known Ukrainian military aircraft. They were too small, too slow. The decision was made to monitor but not engage. It was a decision that would prove fatal. At 4:17 a.m. local time, the strike package launched. 3 drones, flying in loose formation at an altitude of less than 50 meters, approached the S-400 battery from different vectors. They hugged the terrain, using valleys and tree lines for cover. Their flight path had been meticulously planned to avoid known radar installations and observation posts. The lead drone carried a high-definition camera, feeding real-time video back to the operators. Through their screens, the Ukrainian team could see everything: the dark Russian countryside, the faint glow of the air base in the distance, and finally, the distinctive silhouette of the S-400 radar truck. At this point, the Russian crew was beginning to realize something was wrong. Multiple small contacts were now converging on their position. The radar operator shouted a warning. The battery commander grabbed his radio to request permission to engage. But the protocols were clear: confirm the threat before firing. Ammunition was expensive. False alarms were common. Wait for visual confirmation. There was no time. The drones closed in. The Ukrainian operators made final course corrections, guiding each drone toward its designated target with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The lead operator, a former commercial drone photographer from Kiev, steadied his controls. His target, the 96L6E acquisition radar, the eyes of the S-400 system. Without it, the battery was blind. At 4:19 a.m., the first drone struck. The impact was devastating. The shaped charge warhead punched through the radar truck's thin armor and detonated inside, shredding electronics and killing the crew instantly. The radar array collapsed, its delicate components reduced to twisted metal. 2 seconds later, the second drone hit a 5P-85 missile transporter loaded with 4 ready-to-fire missiles. The explosion triggered a chain reaction. The missile's solid rocket propellant ignited, creating a massive fireball that engulfed 2 nearby vehicles. Fragments of shrapnel tore through the battery's command post, severing power cables and communication lines. The third drone targeted the 55K6E command vehicle, the brain of the system. The pilot aimed for the vehicle's roof-mounted satellite antenna array. The strike was perfect. The antenna disintegrated, and secondary explosions rippled through the vehicle's interior as electrical systems overloaded and caught fire. Within 90 seconds, it was over. A $900 million air defense system, one that had taken months to deploy and years to train its crew, was reduced to burning wreckage. The remaining Russian personnel scrambled for cover, expecting a follow-up attack that never came. The Ukrainian drones, their mission complete, had already turned back toward friendly territory. As dawn broke over Kursk, the full scale of the destruction became apparent. Satellite imagery captured by commercial reconnaissance satellites showed the aftermath: blackened craters, destroyed vehicles, and columns of smoke rising into the morning sky. Ukrainian intelligence released drone footage hours later. The images spread across social media within minutes, shared and reshared by millions. The message was clear: Russia's shield had cracks, and Ukraine knew exactly where to strike. For the Russian military, this was more than a tactical defeat. It was an intelligence failure, a technological failure, and a psychological blow. The S-400 was supposed to be invincible. It was the crown jewel of Russian air defense, and it had been destroyed by weapons that cost less than a luxury car. The destruction of the S-400 battery sent shockwaves through Russia's military command. This wasn't the first Russian air defense system destroyed in the war, but it was the most expensive, and it happened deep inside inside Russian territory. Far from the front lines, Moscow faced an impossible choice. Option 1. Pull S-400 systems back from the front lines and redeploy them deeper inside Russia to protect strategic sites like Moscow, St. Petersburg, and nuclear facilities. But this would leave Russian forces in Ukraine vulnerable to Ukrainian air and missile strikes. Option 2. Keep the S-400 batteries forward deployed to protect ground troops, but risk losing more billion-dollar systems to $500 drones. There was no good answer. Russia began implementing emergency countermeasures. They deployed additional short-range air defense systems, Panzer S-1 batteries designed to intercept low-altitude threats. They increased electronic warfare assets. They constructed physical barriers around critical systems, but the damage was done. Ukraine had proven that even Russia's most advanced defenses could be defeated by asymmetric tactics, and the world was watching. NATO intelligence analysts studied the strike closely. If cheap drones could destroy S-400 systems, what did that mean for the future of air defense? What did it mean for the balance of power in Eastern Europe? For Russia's arms export business, the implications were catastrophic. Countries that had spent billions on S-400 systems began questioning their effectiveness. Turkey, a NATO member that controversially purchased the S-400, faced renewed pressure to abandon the system. India, which had deployed S-400 batteries along its border with China, began exploring alternatives. The strike also had a psychological impact. For 2 years, Russia had bombarded Ukrainian cities with missiles and drones. Now Ukraine was striking back, not just militarily, but symbolically. Every destroyed S-400 battery was a humiliation. Every viral video of burning Russian equipment was a propaganda victory. The destruction of the S-400 is more than a tactical victory, it's a glimpse into the future of warfare. For decades, military power was measured in aircraft carriers, stealth fighters, and missile systems. Nations spent trillions building bigger, faster, more advanced weapons. The assumption was simple: technological superiority wins wars. But Ukraine is rewriting that assumption. A $500 drone can destroy a $900 million air defense system. A teenager with a laptop can pilot a strike hundreds of kilometers away. A network of volunteers can coordinate swarm attacks using commercial software. This is asymmetric warfare at its purest, and it's forcing militaries around the world to rethink everything. The US Department of Defense has already begun adapting. In 2024, the Pentagon announced a new initiative called Replicator, a program designed to field thousands of autonomous drones within 2 years. NATO allies are investing billions in counter-drone technology. China is accelerating development of AI-controlled drone swarms. The lesson is clear: the future of warfare belongs to those who can innovate faster, adapt quicker, and think asymmetrically. Russia entered this war believing its advanced systems would guarantee victory. Instead, it's learning the hard way that in modern combat, speed and creativity matter more than raw firepower. And Ukraine, outgunned, outspent, and outnumbered, is teaching the world that lesson one drone strike at a time. The war in Ukraine is far from over. Russian forces still occupy vast stretches of Ukrainian territory. Moscow still possesses thousands of tanks, aircraft, and missiles. The human cost continues to climb, but the destruction of that S-400 battery on August 23, 2024 represents something profound. It represents the power of innovation under pressure, the courage of a nation refusing to surrender, and the reality that in modern warfare, the most dangerous weapon isn't always the most expensive. It's the one your enemy doesn't see coming. As the sun sets over Ukraine, drone operators prepare for another night. Engineers refine their designs. Soldiers plot their next strike. And somewhere in Moscow, Russian generals stare at maps and wonder, how do we stop an enemy we can't see? The answer, it turns out, might not exist. This is the new face of war, and the world is still catching up.